So the FBI knew in September of 2016, and yet how many FISA warrants did they get to spy on the Trump campaign? I've spoken with Carter Page a number of times. He was spied on for a year by the FBI. No charges were ever brought down. What is the culpability for that?
Yeah, 4 FISA warrants starting at the end of September 2016. And I couple the issue is sort of metastasized by the Clinton campaign. And Robbie Mook testified to this in court, the former Clinton campaign manager, that Hillary Clinton herself knew it, authorized it, and they leaked that false information to the media to try to gin up attention against Donald Trump. As I've said before, all roads lead to Andy McCabe, the deputy director, and the Lovebirds in their office concocting an insurance plan in August of 2015. And I think John Durham knows what that insurance plan is.
That's former DOD Chief of Staff Kash Patel last week speaking with Maria on what the FBI knew about the Russiagate hoax and when. A federal jury in Virginia is now deciding the fate of former Hillary Clinton campaign lawyer Michael Sussman, who is charged with lying to the FBI. Special counsel John Durham says Sussman met with the FBI General Counsel James Baker, claiming he had information on a covert communication channel between the Trump Organization and Russia's Alfa Bank. That alleged info has since been completely debunked. Sussman's claimed he was not representing any specific client, but Durham's team alleges that he billed Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign for that FBI meeting. All right, joining me now is California Congressman Darrell Issa. He's a member of both the House Judiciary Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thanks for joining me. I got to tell you what, I look at what information has come out now about how the Hillary Clinton campaign completely orchestrated this hoax, fed it to the FBI, but then the FBI, for 3 years with the media, runs with this story, right? And I want to know, did the FBI and DOJ know this was a hoax and this was politics, or were they completely duped?
Well, they absolutely did know. You know, if you have to choose with the FBI between complete incompetence or wrongdoing, you have to choose wrongdoing. They're too well paid, too well trained, and too well equipped not to know better. And there's evidence that they specifically did know better, that they knew that this wasn't credible even when it was brought to them. But it worked. I mean, let's remember one thing. If something works, you keep doing it. Hunter Biden made $11 million off of his father's name and reputation, and he's an artist making millions more selling art while his father's the president. So if a con works, you do it. In this case, it worked not only to have this false narrative, but to continue with it throughout the entire Trump administration. Most people in America today have this sort of a whiff of, well, was Trump too cozy with Russia, when in fact it was Hunter Biden that got millions from the mayor of Moscow that can't be explained in any way except a payoff to him for being the son of his father.
You know, having a lack of faith in the FBI and the DOJ is dangerous. We want to have faith in those institutions, that justice is blind, that the law is equally applied, and it's not used for political purposes. And I think you're right. They weren't duped. They were fully in on what happened here. Yeah. I wonder, do you think you're going to see more prosecutions come out of this investigation, or does this end with Sussman in the trial that we're waiting for the results on?
Well, a lot depends on the outcome. To be candid with this jury, it's very possible to get a hung jury or even an acquittal. That doesn't mean that the case hasn't been made, that the American people haven't seen sworn testimony that Hillary Clinton knew what they were doing when they falsely accused the president, when they paid to mislead in some way the FBI. And it does mean that when we take control in January, as we anticipate we will, that we've got to help clean house in the Department of Justice and the FBI. These are good organizations with lots of good people, but very clearly they had enough people in high positions, many of whom were still there during the Trump administration, to undermine that administration. And that kind of what I would call, lawyer treason has to be dealt with, and it has to be dealt with by a suspicious Congress. This one is not suspicious. The next one will be. We'll be looking for the kind of wrongdoing, and we'll do it with the Inspector General, with others that can help us root out people who have, in fact, crossed the line and not done their job.
I think every American wants that to happen. We want to root out the corruption in the FBI and the DOJ, and we want faith in those institutions again. But I want to pivot right now. Let's talk about Hunter Biden, because new information has come out of the laptop from hell. And we now know that Hunter Biden purchased burner phone apps so he could make phone calls and place text messages with different phone numbers. Now, I don't know about you, Congressman. I don't have a burner phone app. I don't know any American who has a burner phone app. And I imagine if you have that kind of app, you're doing some pretty shady things, which would necessitate an app that could help you hide your phone number.
Well, you're exactly right. The fact is, you don't need these kinds of virtual phone numbers unless you intend to buy drugs or do something clandestine and then make the line go away. It's very clear that he wanted to do that. He wanted to have multiple numbers so that someone would think they were talking to somebody or texting with somebody on a number, and then he could just make it go away, which he obviously did.
You know, I'm not sure, where this investigation is within the Department of Justice with Hunter Biden, and we're not supposed to know that, and I understand that. But if Republicans take control of the House, will they actually do oversight? Will they do investigations? Will they issue subpoenas to get to the bottom of what Hunter Biden was doing with his foreign business dealings? Because I think, Congressman, that matters, because if he was doing foreign business dealings, Hunter, and Joe Biden was getting a kickback, Joe Biden is compromised. Joe Biden has given dirt to the Russians and the Chinese that can be used against him. That means Joe Biden isn't putting America first. He's putting his family and his career and his politics ahead of the country.
Well, you're exactly right. And we have to do two types of oversight. One, to push to make sure the Department of Justice does their job, which is criminal prosecution. And in our case, the kind of research we need to do to improve legislation and compliance. The fact that Hunter Biden got on the vice president's aircraft and was taken to the countries he was doing business with, it's very likely that we need to change the law so that could never happen again. You can't have the president, the vice president, essentially bringing his family in and using them. Current law apparently allows for it. So there are legislative reasons we need to do investigation, but the most important one was the one we started with, which is we've got to get the Department of Justice to be reliable and do their job, and to do it blindly. And right now, as you can see, Hunter Biden is not even paying a price for his income tax evasion. He's going to pay back apparently a couple of $1 million that he deceived and got away with for a period of time. That's not what would happen to you or I. If you and I cheated the government out of millions of dollars, it would not be just pay the fine later. There'd be criminal prosecution. That's an Al Capone type of event, and yet it's very clear he's not being prosecuted.
You know what? Paying the crime late doesn't mean that the crime wasn't committed. You're so right, Congressman. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me this morning on Sunday Morning Futures.
Thank you.